UVing the lantern is actually not too difficult. All of the revolved surfaces have the same method of UVing, and all the extruded surfaces have a very similar method of UVing. I'm going to start with the bottom, and when you UV, you should not be in the smoothing preview, so I'm going to hit 1 to get out of it, and change my workspace from modeling standard to UV editing. There we go. I'm going to close that, and close this, and you can see the default UVs are not great. I'm going to come over to the UV toolkit, down to Create, Shift left click on my planar mapping, and make sure I have camera and keep image width height ratio checked on. And when I hit Apply, I will have a snapshot of basically the wireframe of what my perspective camera sees. And I need to make a few cuts on this, and I want to make cuts wherever there's a very large change in direction. UVing, you have to unfold your 3D object so it lies down flat. And when we have everything sewn together, we can't do that. So I'm going to go into edge mode, and there's a large change of direction from the bottom, which is more or less flat, to this side, which is more or less straight up and down. So I'm going to click on any of these edges where that change in direction starts, come over to Cut and Sew, and cut. And you can see I now have a bold white line going around. There you go. Now it's purple, a little bit easier to see. I'm going to have one more cut going all the way around. And that's where it goes from up and down at this 45-degree angle. And that change in direction happens about right here. So I'm going to cut that as well. I now have 3 UV shells, the top, the middle, and the bottom. The top and the bottom are more or less done. All I have to do is select them, come down to Unfold, and hit Unfold. I'm not worried about the layout right now, I just want to get the shells looking good. This one needs to have a cut going up and down. It doesn't really matter where the cut is made, since it is a circular object. However, you want to try to hide UV cuts as best you can. So if you know you're only going to be viewing the lantern from the front, maybe choose an edge in the back or on the side. I'm just going to choose the left side to make it easy. If I double click on an edge in the 3D viewport, it will select that entire edge loop from the very bottom to the very top, and it'll go through all of my UV cuts. I don't want to affect the top or the bottom UV shell. They're exactly how I want them to be. So instead of selecting it in the 3D viewport, I'm going to zoom in on my UVs and double click the edge there. When you double click an edge in the UV editor, it will stop when it comes to a UV cut. I'm going to hit cut again, go to UV shell, and hit unfold. I'm not worried about it being curved because Substance Painter will do a very good job at texturing UVs like this. Next, I'm going to go up to this piece of geometry. It's a little bit harder to see, so I'm going to hit Control-1 to isolate. There's no bottom, so I don't have to worry about cutting that off, but there is a top that I need to extract. So I'm going to start with my planar map. And I'm going to have a couple of cuts because there's a big change in direction here. So I'm going to put in a cut going around there, and probably one more up here. You can get to your cut tool in your UV editor by shift right click and cut. When you're in UV shell, you can shift right click and get to unfold. You have to hover over it, and then it will give you more unfold options, and the middle one is the normal unfold. Now for these, they do need to have another cut. I'm going to put it on the left side again, which is right here. I'm going to cut, and where's that last one? Cut that one as well. And I'm going to hit unfold. So this top one still has a fair amount of compression and stretching. So I think I'm going to cut it as well. It's right here. Oops. You can see it's split apart. It's not perfect. Could probably get it looking a little bit better if I cut this part off. There's a lot of ways you could do it. This is far from perfect, but it will work for what I'm doing. It's also a very small detail that you're probably not going to look too much at because it is inside of another piece of geometry. The piece of glass is fairly easy. There are two big changes in directions on the top and the bottom. And I'm going to make sure I cut on the left side, like all of my other cuts. I'm going to select all three shells and unfold. A lot of these UV cuts will be more or less the same thing. This one has a fair amount of stretching along here, or compression, and hopefully one more cut will help fix that. That is a little bit better. You can also see that it goes from fairly white to blue right there. So you can cut it and unfold. Depends on if you want to have a little bit more stretching and compression and more cuts, or fewer cuts with a little bit more stretching. Finally, this top piece, planar map. And if you ever can't find the edge that you're trying to cut in the UV editor, just double click on it in the 3D editor, move it around in the UV editor, and you can see where that edge is. And that unfolded fairly nicely. The other ones are much easier. Start with this handle. The only thing that might give us a little bit of a problem is right here where I added that hole. But I'm going to start with a planar map and find this middle edge right on the inside. That'll probably be the edge that's the hardest to see. I'm going to cut and unfold. And you can see there's a little bit of red around where we made this new piece of geometry. If you have this as a separate piece of geometry, your UVing will be a little bit easier. But I'm just going to isolate it and cut it out. And I'm going to cut the corners. So right here, from this corner, it goes all the way in and then stops when it gets to this quad because it branches off into two different directions, and that's where the edge loop ends. I'm just going to do that for all four corners. Cut and unfold. That's looking a little bit better, and hopefully that is too. The top handle, I'm going to do a planer, and then make a cut on the bottom, and then unfold it. And it should be a perfectly straight line. These two will be very similar, however you'll need one more cut. I'm going to do both at the same time with both selected. Hit planer, going to select edge loop on the inside of both of them. Hit cut, and then I need to cut it in the other direction as well. You can think of this as a closed hose. If you wanted to lay it down flat, you would have to unscrew the ends and then cut the bottom, and you have to do the same thing. So I'm going to cut and unfold. I believe that's everything UV'd. It is a huge mess right now, which is okay. I'm going to take this handle, duplicate it, hold down J, and rotate it 180 degrees. Go to UV shell, and it's going to put a layout on everything to start. I think for the tutorial, I'm just going to leave it as is. There are a few useful things in the layout options. Make sure you have Unfold 3D turned on for that and for your actual unfold tool. I have mine set for a 4096 by 4096, a 4K texture, with shell padding and tile padding of 5. Without that, your shells will be right on the edge of your UV editor, and sometimes that can cause problems. And sometimes they will be touching each other if you don't have that padding on. I do like to have either horizontal or vertical selected, and that just orients your shells in a fairly uniform way. In the next part, I'm going to go over how to set it up to export to Painter with a material color export and using Bake by Mesh name.